So in terms of how AI can actually boost CTV, we think of it in a way of how building blocks come together for a media plan in general, right? So from a digital media plan, that is supply, creative, audience, and measurement. So AI kind of is touching all of our kind of lives as it is to make it easier. And I kind of look at it from how can I take advantage of that technology as a tool to make things better? And if we think about kind of those daily life interactions with AI, it actually makes our life a hell of a lot easier without us actually realizing. So if we apply that to a media standpoint, I think from a supply perspective, it's quite easy then to understand how AI can influence supply. And that's kind of understanding a number of different things, whether that's the time of the ad, or the kind of price of the ad, or the day of the week that is actually being served, and understanding all of the signals that are coming in from supply sources to actually make concerted efforts to make your media more effective, to reach the right audience at the right time, but also kind of make it much more efficient and more effective from an advertiser perspective. On the second building block in creative, AI is kind of probably getting a bad rep because a lot of people are perhaps using it for purposes that aren't necessarily true to form. Like I said, AI is meant to help. It's not necessarily meant to create concepts. And we as humans kind of need to humanize AI as much as possible. And from that perspective, that's kind of saying, well, the core story, the core creative messaging resonates with the consumers or the audiences that you want to reach. And that can be just one single story. But how AI can perhaps influence that is creating different versions and cutting and splicing that content in different ways to become more personalized for lots of different audiences. I see it in terms of, if I come on to the next part of audiences, is we want to talk to as many audiences as possible as advertisers, but from a kind of technology perspective, it's about how the AI application can actually then kind of cut and splice that creative in as many different places to influence all of those different audiences at varying times. I talked about audiences, and that's arguably the second most important aspect of this. The way that kind of digital touch points come together, I talked about it from an inventory perspective, but it's equally applicable, if not more applicable, from an audience perspective. If we think about our daily consumption and how we consume television, it doesn't really tell you a lot about what you're actually a market for, what you have an affinity for in daily life. You might be interested in true crime. It doesn't mean you're going to go out and actually kill somebody. So the digital touch points from an online perspective and a more kind of digital perspective from mobile behavior to desktop behavior might actually tell you a lot more about that person, and that application can then be kind of transferred through a number of digital signals and touch points to the CTV experience. So that's kind of how AI can influence from an audience perspective, how you can plan, activate, and finally, and what we're going to talk about, the final building block of how AI can boost CTV is measurement. So we've talked about all things going one way in terms of how to reach an audience, with different supply sources and creative and actually building and crafting those audiences. But then what's the feedback loop coming back to actually close the circle, if you like, of your plan? And that's in measurement in terms of KPIs. And the digital touch points that actually you deliver your media on can actually quite easily be crafted back using AI to connect those digital data signals together to give you a real robust understanding of how your media has actually performed, and therefore making that activity much more performant. It could be that you're delivering to a certain geolocation, to a certain kind of group of households. And if that is the case, it's kind of then circling that back and understanding what the perhaps brand lift was, whether you've engaged with the creative from a QR code perspective and actually reached them on the mobile devices. And that can kind of then lead to further measurement around things like footfall, for example. And all of a sudden, you're then connecting that consumer journey in a much more meaningful way to understand exactly kind of how your CTV activity has actually performed.